Hey everybody, welcome to the Society of Illustrators New Visions podcast. This episode was recorded live from the Society of Illustrators in New York City. With the New Visions podcast, we want to talk about a whole host of issues that contemporary illustrators face, including topics of diversity, inclusion, and illustration's role in a larger cultural context. The New Visions committee is Jonathan Bartlett, Jensine Eckwall, Yao Xiao, Chris Kindred, and myself, John Lee. Our wonderful sound engineer is James Pierce. Today we're talking about technology and illustration from process to communication. Yao Xiao sat down with 4 illustrators who use tech in unique ways: Rebecca Mock, Kyle Webster, Leland Goodman, and Jensine Eckwall.
Hi everybody, this is the New Visions podcast recorded live at the Society of Illustrators in New York City. My name's Yao, I'm the host today, and I'm hosting a talk about technology and illustration. Before we dive in, I'm gonna have everyone here introduce themselves.
Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca Mock. I'm an illustrator and comic book artist, and I use computers for everything.
Hi,
That's my technology. Sorry.
I'm Leland Goodman. I am exactly that also. Comics, illustration, love computers.
Darn good too.
My name's Jensen. I'm an illustrator. Normally I help produce the podcast. Today I'm hanging out and talking. My work is almost entirely traditional, but still use a lot of technology, and I love the internet.
Yeah, and we have Kyle here dialing in. So Kyle, take it away.
Hi, I'm Kyle Webster, and I'm an illustrator as well, and I also make Photoshop brushes. And do other things.
So I'm really glad to have you all here today as a very interesting group of people, I think, to dive into the subject of illustration technology. And as we have talked a little bit before we started, everyone has had different experience in terms of like how deep they are into technology, whether it's Rebecca, who you work with technology a lot, so you have answered this question so many times, and Kyle, you literally make the Photoshop brushes, so you have something to say, and Leland, you are a digital illustrator, so that's your medium and that's your space. And then for Jensen and I, we're illustrators. I'm not heavily digital either in my techniques, so we still use technology as part of our work. So to start, I want everyone to just have like 1 or 2 sentences about like what do you think about technology as an illustrator, and why do you think you're talking about it today here?
Well, as far as technology, like literally, it's anything. Like any tool we use, it's just part of our craft. And for me, the entire process that I go through begins and ends with Photoshop, with the computer, and then afterwards it goes into using all sorts of software and internet services to spread my work. So as far as technology goes, the computer itself it contains my entire business, my entire livelihood.
Yeah, I think you and I are kindred spirits, definitely. Because I was just thinking about this. I think that if I didn't have digital media as an option, I don't know that I would be happy as an artist, honestly, because it's so fast and so matches kind of the speed at which I want to go, and I like having everything like kind of connected and like easily communicating. Like I super get into that. So.
Yeah, like personally, when I work, I like to working on paper, working with materials helps me think. Like I find that there's like a space between what I'm thinking and what I'm doing when I'm working entirely on the computer. So that's just like a choice that I've made, and I believe that like it's art. Everybody chooses what techniques, what methods work best for what they're making. But like all contemporary illustrators, my business exists almost entirely online. Like post what I'm working on the internet. And I mean, everything, regardless of how it's made, ends up getting sent off to clients on the computer.
Kyle, it's your turn.
Yeah, I was just sorry I'm not in the room, so I have to wait until I'm prompted. But no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't really have probably much of a career at all if it weren't for Photoshop and for computers and everything. In fact, when I first started out, my whole style revolved around drawing in Flash with a very specific technique, and it would be almost impossible to replicate with traditional media. In fact, now that I think of it, it would be totally impossible. So, the first 5 years of my editorial illustration career, anyway, would never have been possible style-wise without the computer. So, and yeah, Photoshop changed my whole life many, many times for different reasons. And it seems like every few years something else happens in Photoshop that makes it possible for me to reinvent myself or to push things farther for my business. So I'm totally in that same camp. I would be kind of lost without all of this technology.
Yeah, so let's get a little more specific. Like, what would you be doing if this was like 10 years ago, and then you're an illustrator, and like you still have to make a living? What would you do without technology, or what would you have done if you didn't work with technology? Kyle, you can keep going.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, for me, 10 years ago I was illustrating in Photoshop and Flash, but I mean, let's just go back farther. If I had come out of school and didn't have the option to use a computer, I would have certainly tried. I mean, I always wanted to be making images for a living, but I just can't imagine what medium I would have chosen, frankly, that would have. It's so hard to think back to what would have been possible when I'm already so spoiled now, knowing what is possible. I think I probably would have given it a go with acrylics and tried to become a painter. And I probably would have gone the book cover route, try and get some book cover work and things like that. But I don't know if I ever would have even considered editorial, because I wouldn't think I'd be able to work fast enough, not realizing there was a fast way to work without the computer. I mean, I see people like Graham Romeu in Canada doing these gorgeous pen and ink and watercolor wash drawings, and I know he does them pretty quickly, but I never had that facility with those tools. So I probably would have wound up eventually doing something that I didn't like and being a really sad person. I don't know, it's hard to say, isn't it? It's really hard.
So did you, because I feel like before when we were talking about the impact of your brushes, your business and your product, I think that's true for many illustrators that are working today. And do you guys use Kyle's brushes?
Yes.
It's a plug for you, Kyle. But like, can you guys who are here also, like talk about like if you didn't have technology, like what would you have you have done, and also like what do you think this tool gives you? Is it like speed or like techniques that you couldn't have learned, or things that were too hard to use?
I'd say much of my current style is related to Photoshop and related to those tools, but that might be optimistic. I also think that a big part of my style comes from the comics and fun things I was drawing by hand 10 years ago in college. And overall is just the imagery that I'm attracted to, whether or not I'm using Photoshop or my sketchbook or ink or anything. So without Photoshop, I think I would still be doing imagery very similar to what I'm doing now. It just might not be as complex, because there's a level of detail and there's a level of there's the animation, the different nuances that you can put into it with technology wouldn't have been possible. And I also feel like I wouldn't have had the influences that I have, because I'm so connected to our community through the internet. If I didn't have that, I feel like I would be in a very different place. But then,
oh my God, that's so interesting. I never thought about that.
Like,
but you're right.
the people that
Without the internet.
I wouldn't have met any of you guys if the internet didn't
Yeah.
exist. But then again, maybe we would have met at a comic book convention. Basically, comics trump the internet.
Yeah.
I think that's my
I agree.
conclusion.
I definitely agree with that. I think I would probably be going way harder into comics than I am now, because my attention span is so short. So I think really Photoshop is what allows me to make illustrations, because you can there's the undo button, pretty much just the undo button, actually, I'd say. It's like the what has saved my career entirely.
Yeah, we can get into Photoshop shortcuts.
Oh my God.
Like
yeah.
top 5?
Customizing stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, I probably also wouldn't leave my house so much if it weren't for technology, just because I'm a big advocate for Twitter, and I know a lot of people are kind of iffy about it, but it's really my favorite. Like, I love kind
Twitter.
of, like, you can have such a good interaction with people you would just never meet from all over the world, and then when you do meet them in person, you connecting is so much easier, for me at least.
So why does technology get you out of the house more? Because I think people's argument is like it keeps you in the house.
I think it's because I think I've actually learned kind of to socialize better with technology, and it makes me aware of things that are going on outside my house, really. Yeah,
you wouldn't get invited to parties.
exactly. Facebook events. That's really it.
How would we know about stuff that was happening?
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess like for me, even just like emails like doesn't even count as part of technology anymore. But I was like, how would you know anything?
Yeah.
Emails are really like letter writing at this point, I would say.
Yeah,
10 years ago was around when I got my email address and started using it.
I think it's fun, Kyle, like talking about your brushes, because I remember when they first came out when I was maybe in school. I think like what I remember being the appeal was how beautifully they replicated traditional media, which is, like a news site comes out and it gets better and better. So like these digital brushes are still being inspired by tactile art. So like there's something even in digital art that we're looking for that feels tactile, and that's like such a big part of the appeal. So I just think there's a really cool back and forth.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Like life inspiring the tech, and then so I mean, like, even though I paint, I use these brushes to edit my stuff, because like I can
I
paint.
love hearing that.
Yeah, I can paint with a gouache brush on top of an actual gouache painting, and I would not be able to do commercial work without being able to make revisions, because like you just have to. So people are always like, oh, can you do this? If you're gonna have to make revisions, and you just have to figure it out.
That's really cool. That's a really cool way for illustrators who work in traditional media and then still use it as a tool, because I feel like sometimes the conversation is like black and white, whether you are a digital person or you're a traditional media person, and I think today that line is super blurred. Would you guys?
Oh yeah, I actually have a story about that. The very first time I had a piece accepted into the Society of Illustrators was a drawing I did of Jack Black that was done on the computer. It was done in Photoshop, and it looked like ink with watercolor. And I'd made a large print of it and sent it up there, and I was all excited to go. And I went, and I was standing there next to it, and I'm not going to say who it was, but a very well-known illustrator approached me and said, "Oh, is that yours?" And it's really nice. I also work in watercolor, and I said, well, actually, I drew this on the computer, and their face really soured, and their visuals went soured, and they just kind of like, oh, and then they went away, and that was 14 years ago. So like, it's amazing how quickly that mindset has kind of, I think it's pretty much gone now. I think everyone respects the form, the medium, whatever. If it's digital, that's fine. And it's not like it meant that you don't have any skill or anything.
I don't know.
So,
sometimes you go to a con and people will be like, is this digital or traditional?
Yes.
And they'll be like, digital.
Really?
And they'll be like, I got a guy shaking his head at me once. I was like,
Hey, oh.
the drawings are just drawings.
Yeah, sometimes I'm not sure why people ask that question because I'm like, you're not getting the original, like you're getting a print. Yeah.
Well, the people still, it's less common now, but people do still sell originals at comic conventions, and they're always, I mean, I wonder if it was just, if it happened more often, or, okay, what am I asking? There's a different audience at comic conventions now, and it might be because digital art has sort of changed the field of not just illustration, but comics, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going back to comics, and because comics, like, especially small press comics, has really ingrained itself in our community of illustration as well. But it's changed a lot of what the market looks like. And traditional
definitely.
media has also influenced the way digital art looks, like you said. I think like our careers wouldn't look like they do now if traditional artists didn't start picking up digital tools. We didn't start straight in digital work. We all started with traditional media, and then we skipped to digital, basically.
Yeah, with the comics, I noticed that things like Hark a Vagrant, and it's amazing how there's this platform now for getting work out. I'm not sure if this is the right place to talk about that because that could be a whole other conversation. But just the fact that technology allows for us to have this incredibly wide-reaching audience and then for something to transition from screen to print as a result of a following that's built up over online is to me just such a fantastic thing that's happening for all of us as artists right now. It's wonderful, and it's making careers for people. It's just amazing. So
So here's a kind of I think this is a very dated question, but when I was in school, there were still teachers who would give people like a letter grade down if they used entirely digital media. Oh
my gosh.
Yeah, it was still a thing. But like what so for all of you using digital media, like it certainly allows people to have more freedom and get started in their career faster. On the other hand, I think it always comes back to like, no, you still have to be a good draftsman. You still have to know how to draw, and then all of this knowledge about like light and color and composition, it doesn't, like, using the computer wouldn't compensate for that. So but then everyone has expressed how it helped them and started their career. So what do you think it does compensate for, so people feel a little more grounded in this like discussion about whether it's all because of the computer or is it because of who they are? Yeah. So what does it give you that's so magical?
Maybe it's all a placebo effect, and maybe we started our own careers on our own power.
Yeah.
And we're all very talented people, and we all have the power to do great things with or without computers. But maybe it's Photoshop, and maybe it's the undo button.
Yeah.
So like
and layers.
I'm behind that anyone who does great work, they can just do great work. But I was like, well, can that person do great work if they've never picked up a brush and then I asked them to do a painting? Like they will probably just be getting used to the medium. So what is your background that you stand by? Like, this part is me, and then this other part is technology as a medium. Do you have a clear distinction of a line?
I feel like I don't really, because I know that that's always picked apart, and that's, like you said, like I had also professors who would, greatly discourage digital work, and then I had classes just about digital work. But I feel like interesting art is interesting art, and good work is good work, and I can't really, like, I also, when people ask, like, is this digital or traditional? If you have to ask that, does it matter?
I think that's
that
when you
impact
win.
you? Yeah, exactly.
I had a professor who said something like, you have to, if you do digital work, or you mix both digital and traditional mediums, you have to put something in that leaves a bit of mystery. Like that you always have to put something in where if a person looks really closely at it, they can't tell how you did it because they can't see like the brushstrokes. And so
why does that matter to people, I wonder?
I think it's a trend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
I
there are
think you're
certainly
right.
artists who don't hide anything. Like there's a lot of I'm trying to think of someone specific. Koichi Tetsuro.
Oh, yeah.
Tetsuro Kyuchi?
Yes, he uses like a simple chalk Photoshop brush to draw everything, and it's very clear how he uses it. And then he just puts a lot of textures over it, and it's beautiful. It's a painting.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. It's almost MS Paint. It's so simple, but it's such a beautiful image. It's so perfectly composed.
And there is good
So
work
what's
that's
it-
been done in MS
sorry.
Paint.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to follow up about the Tetsuro Kyuchi as an example of an artist who, if you look at his older picture books where he painted with oils,
So different.
in I believe it was like late 80s, early 90s, but it's for one thing, it's very different. For another thing, not in any way to be critical of his work, because he's fantastic, but I would say that if you look at some of that older work, it could feel dated today in comparison to some other kinds of work, and maybe that's because so much work now is digital and there are all these styles that didn't exist and so on and so forth. But I think the style he works in with Photoshop that you're talking about, it seems to me like it would be impossible to replicate that style with natural media, just impossible, without it taking either way too long or, well, anyway, I think that's really just
It
the
would be a
argument
lot
there.
more
It would take
meticulous.
so long, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? I think it's sort of like there's an
Well-
example of technology being a necessary component for a very well-established and successful and one of my favorite illustrators. But, without that technology component, I'm not sure we would ever have seen work that looked like that. It's amazing that the technology allowed for him to work in a way that he created this completely new way of making images that is very much his own. It's kind of amazing.
I mean, I think there's a lot of influence of like screen prints and very vintage illustration in his work. I mean,
Yeah, there is, yeah.
I would disagree. I think that his work is very strongly influenced. And a lot of digital work is very strongly influenced by like a very trend towards vintage-looking illustrations and something very graphic, which works well now with printing because I think we're drawn to those images that remind us of like the mid-century, early century illustration.
I think there is some like deep brain thing that like tends people towards something tactile. Like even if something's entirely digital, people are still going to throw a texture on it because something like unless it's like really calculated and like extremely well done, like flat Photoshop colors, it can look like Photoshoppy without something at least I think like bringing it back into a space of being tactile. Like
That's a very good point.
although like I do think I don't know, like when I was in school everybody was doing like inclined digital color and then throwing a watercolor texture on top of it,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that because Jensen and I went to school together. But like, yeah, for me it was like because for me like digital painting or like making your work entirely digitally or like using it as like the most of your process, it's a little different than yeah, actually I don't think it's different, but I do think it's like a medium that I would say it's its own. Like even with the like you scan part of your drawing and then you piece it together, I'm thinking of it as a medium altogether. It's like ink and watercolor, or it's like acrylic paintings with like markers. So I would say it's like one that's like faster to use, and if you don't do it well, the side effects is like it looks tacky. But then the same with like acrylic painting, like it dries really fast and it's like really vibrant. If you don't do it well, it looks tacky.
And sometimes Photoshop looks like it's very fast and easy, but my Photoshop paintings take a long time to paint. There's a lot of tiny little adjustments and details that go into it. So it might, and there's a lot to be said about quick gouache paintings, I think, like, or any kind of illustrated painting. Like if you have a process and you know it and you've done it 100 times before, it can be very quick and easy.
Yeah, I think if you don't really do it well in anything, like airbrushing can look like super amazing, or you can do it like, and it looks like the tackiest thing ever. I don't think it's the medium. It's the
And tacky's relative.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's things that we consider of our aesthetic that won't be the same in 10 years.
Yeah. So I do think, do you guys agree that digital art has, like, it's kind of its own medium, so it's not necessarily like better as a type of art comparing to like traditional, but it's like one way out of many ways that artists has invented to allow them to make the kind of work that they really want to make.
It's just like it's just a medium.
Yeah.
Like any other medium. And when people ascribe objective value to a medium, that's just very reductive.
Right.
It's funny because like when I used to work here at the museum, people would ask me what like mixed media meant all the time. So they'd be like, well, so it's like a painting and then it's in the computer, but how do you get it into the computer? It's amazing to have that conversation because to us it just seems so everyday.
Yeah.
But yeah, even like that combination is still like an idea for people to grasp.
Yeah, so I think a lot of things has moved on, that it's like mixed media, so it's like multimedia, and there's also like motion and photos and videos and animation, so it's like really hard to pinpoint like what it is, and then the audiences are kind of just more used to taking in the content and be like, this is about subject, and then the art like communicated that, or it provided the experience, and that was great. So I don't feel like, I think today, especially in schools and maybe talking with different generations of illustrators, I think digital kind of like officially like graduated as like, this is just how it is now.
Yeah, I think it followed digital information because newspapers have become digital newspapers have become so much a part of how we spread information, and Twitter and Facebook, and how we the kind of jobs that we get hired for, they are for digital articles, they're for digital advertisements. So of course, eventually, even if there are people working in traditional medium, their work is going to be for digital content. So it's something that it's hard to say which came first, but it's we're here now. We're all and technology is going to continue to evolve in the way we share information, and illustration is going to inevitably follow that if it doesn't get there first.
Yeah.
Yao, you asked a while back when we started this one chain here about whether or not you think the computer can make you. You said or you mentioned skills basically. You have to have good drafting skills and so on. And I would say that you don't really have to have great drawing skills necessarily to become a successful illustrator. If you understand a few basic tricks in Photoshop that make images look good, like certain ways to use texture or certain brushes. I guess I'm partly responsible for this, but anyway, if you figure out a way to use a certain brush or to use textures, or there's a certain way you work stylistically that you can own that doesn't rely in any way on what we might consider a traditional skill set, then you've got a career. And I also don't bring this up to say that there's anything bad about that or anything to be looked down upon, because that was another thing I experienced earlier on in my career, which was just that I think the Jack Black story is the same idea, where if you use a computer, you are somehow a lesser artist for not taking the time to, learn how to work with a traditional medium and get to a certain level where you've mastered it. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there.
I agree. I think like I'm relating to it is that I didn't know anything about animation, but I use animation so often in my work because I learned a couple tricks, and it's become part of my entire business. So it definitely I think like if that's true, then what you're saying is definitely true. That you can take what you know and what you like to do and turn it into a whole portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
What do you all think about reinvention? I mean, I think artists now have a great luxury career-wise in that they can reinvent themselves in a digital environment much more quickly. And that's my opinion anyway. I think that in just one environment, that being Photoshop, you can go from drawing or painting a certain way to a completely different style in a matter of hours just by changing the way you work. Whereas if in the traditional realm, you would have to go out and buy a whole new set of tools, try and figure out how they work, etc. But that's no longer really an issue, and people can have multiple identities as an illustrator, and they can, lots of people have alter egos and so on. But anyway, it's just kind of interesting to me that we have that flexibility, and we might even take that for granted. It's pretty amazing.
I feel like with how accessible illustration is now for everyone because of Tumblr, because of Twitter, just because everyone, you can bang out a sketch and put it up. I've been thinking about that kind of as a double-edged sword because you can see trends happen so quickly, and I feel like reinvention is pretty necessary, I think, because you post something and then you'll see it kind of become very popular, like a certain style, months later. And what do you guys think? Because I don't know if it's good or bad or just a gray area.
I think it can be tough for artists starting out. I think there's kind of two scenarios that people can run into. Like, they will post a sketch on Twitter that will get a lot of recognition, for example, and so that's okay, that's what you're being signaled to do by your audience. Oh, they like that, but then you can get kind of limited because you want that reaction every time. And or on the other hand, if you're putting stuff online and it's not getting the response you want, then it can be really discouraging as well. But I feel like it is tough to start out in an environment where a lot of your a lot of the feedback you're getting is this very simplistic,
an addictive thing.
Very addictive, really appealing reaction that can list your work into being something that is maybe you won't grow as much. This isn't a negative thing. It's just something that can happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a part of the way we socialize now. Everything sort of happens in waves. For me, that energy is what carried my my work into my editorial career, and I sort of thrived on it, and I learned a lot from it. And I think, I'm not saying I ended up better than where I would be, but I was influenced very strongly by things that were happening very quickly, and so my style changed week to week until I settled on where I wanted to be. So I found it very helpful to be able to move to sort of dive into the then the Tumblr, what is it? What were they called? The special tags in Tumblr.
Oh yeah.
When you were featured, to dive into that and to try to follow it and to try to make a piece that I know would go viral. Mm-hmm. That was a very energizing thing to do at first when I had nothing else, when I had no work.
Mm-hmm. I feel like personally it's been a learning cycle that I probably would have gone through without technology, but I got through it really quickly because I feel like there were a few years of when you first start posting your art online and you get a reaction, it's that addiction thing. It's oh, this is great. And then once that kind of starts to fail, once your art becomes mostly about that, at least for me, I had to go through that period of, okay, well, something's wrong here, and I think it's the work that I'm making, and I think I'm making it for the wrong reason. Not the wrong reason, but just kind of it doesn't mean as much to me. So as of this year, all my personal work has really been about okay, let's be as self-indulgent as humanly possible. So it's been a lot of cute, fluffy, pink girly things, and it's been so therapeutic for me, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And actually, we are gonna Yeah, we're gonna like segue into what we draw now that we've gone over how we use technology. And then I want to bring up technology as a subject of illustration. Do you guys all illustrate things that's technology related once in a while?
I kind of, in the work that I do as far as like what I get paid to do, which is like stuff that I can't share, like it's corporate ads and things like that. I paint a lot of phones.
Yeah.
I paint a lot of laptops and I paint a lot of computers.
Me too.
I paint a lot of offices full of tech. It's because it's just part of our environment. It's just part of a person's silhouette is the technology that they carry. It's part of the layout of a room. It's part of interior design. And because it's part of how we communicate, it's an effective tool for conveying a concept. So people, and sometimes it's lazy to turn to like, the cell phones are metaphor. That's just like, I'll throw that sketch in there because people always like that.
Yeah, and what about the things that you can show in terms of editorial, like stuff like that? And you think like, because there are like technology.
Oh yeah, like articles about technology.
Yeah,
but I feel like the trend for that is to not show the technology in a literal way, and to go for something more abstract, more fantastical.
Yeah, so there's like on one end, there are people who only want phones, and there's another side of people who want no phones. Do you know why? Like,
do you guys know why?
Well,
do you guys know why?
I feel like sometimes there's an idea like not drawing the tech because it can look dated soon. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, out of all I can't think of any reasons why.
That makes sense.
But it's so literal. I think it's just boring, which is why Soo Jin is such. I love when she assigns something because she definitely doesn't want you to do a literal interpretation of whatever financial story you're writing about, or I guess the same with tech. I don't know about you, but I hate drawing a literal depiction of some person holding a phone up to their head and there's an exclamation point over their head or something.
A phone's such a boring.
Although I get asked to draw that kind of stuff all the time,
like
so
drawing
whatever.
Phones.
So these are the best laptops I've like ever seen. Like the best like softly beeping.
Oh my gosh,
It's
laptops
so
are really fun to paint. I'm sorry.
That's
No,
amazing.
I'm glad that you like it because then you're the one doing it and you do a great job.
But it's the equivalent of like drawing the businessman climbing up the ladder to grab the dollar bill. It's the thing that it degrades the quality of illustration as a whole when you go to the easiest solution for a piece. Even though illustration, by definition, is finding the easiest visual solution for a complicated concept, we have to try a little bit harder than that. And it's sometimes I think there's just a lot going on, so technology does sort of get into the mix.
Yeah, and I do think there's something odd about like not like if you only illustrate the film for a article that's obviously already about tech, because all of the things that's happening is in this piece of technology, so that without anything that's in it, it's just a tablet. So because I feel like in the past, I don't know if in the history of illustration, we've always had like new technologies that we have to introduce that it, like doesn't look like shapely appealing. So what are some of the other solutions that you guys use for illustrating like the actual functioning of technology? I would imagine it gets really abstract.
Yeah, like the world of the internet. It is difficult. I find I always go for the literal solution. I like paintings of rooms. I like very realistic scenes. And so my conceptual solutions always go towards like a scene of a real person in reality, whether in the past or the present, doing something. But
Rebecca, you do that so well. I mean, it's unfair. So the rest of us have to try and figure out some metaphor.
That's my easy, like I take the easy out. Like I find a lot of illustrators actually go above and beyond and create whole new visual styles to accommodate the the technological world we live in.
I think that's because they can't draw a person sitting at a computer and make it look
No, that's
interesting
not
like
it,
you
no.
do. So that's the reason.
Yeah, so it's interesting that when we're illustrating things about technology, the virtual world it does seem like, I'm glad you mentioned people, because everyone seems to like they're outside of the technology space and they're in the physical space. In the virtual world, it's like this like seemingly faceless, like everyone's anonymous, floating as like a little
illustrations
data
of people
bit.
turned
Yeah.
away.
Yeah,
It's usually
What's
very
that?
it's usually very critical. Like, that kind of art to accompany an article that's like, man, everyone's so absorbed with their phones and their Facebook.
Right.
But I
But
think
then one person is looking up and they're in full color.
right. And they've escaped the bonds. Yeah, no, I feel like because I don't do so much editorial, but I have done some pieces like for myself that are about they're much more literal because they're kind of about like the love we feel, that like we're so attached to like our phones. And I don't think that's like at all a bad thing. I think it's so interesting that it's like we hold this little rectangle and like just by the expressions on people's faces, it's just like it's like the one thing everyone would bring to the desert island,
Sure.
and I think that's great. I think that's a great thing that like we have in our lives now, and we're so connected to people that way.
Can I ask something? Bouncing off of it, I feel like we talk about technology as this thing that we can use so easily, and like we all have phones and we all have this lifestyle that is surrounded by technology, but isn't there a level of like elitism to that? Because some people don't have the latest computer. Like if you're a student and you can't afford something, it's going to take you a lot longer to like get to the level you want to get to. Or if you if you don't have like the right phone, you can't get the right like apps to do what you want to do. So we're all talking about, we have very similar styles, you and me, and we all use Photoshop, but there's a lot of other things out there that we don't have access to. Like there's a lot of very expensive software that I'm not going to buy because maybe even if I have like an inkling to learn how to use it. And for I think a lot of people, that's how they feel about Photoshop.
That now it's more of a subscription that you have to
Yeah.
Yes.
I only very recently broke down and bought Photoshop.
Yeah, I started to actually buy it, or like just good equipment. Yeah, I do think it's like it compensates for other things, like oil paints is expensive.
That's true.
Or like renting.
I wonder if anyone's done the
studio.
math.
Yeah, I'd be
true.
interested to see. Yeah, like renting a real
Renting studio space.
It's expensive. I work digitally because you don't require any space. You can do it in your bedroom. What do you guys think?
Yeah, but it all seems to it seems like the time you live in, it all seems to somehow work out. Other than, well, I would agree certainly that we're very fortunate and privileged to be able to have, if you can afford a computer that's a good computer with a lot of speed and power, and you can afford a Photoshop subscription, and you can afford a Wacom tablet, and then an internet connection is obviously necessary. All those things do really add up, and I suppose many of us might take that for granted. But if you think about maybe 50 years ago, and you did have to buy oil paint and work with brushes and then ship your art or photograph it yourself and ship it, etc., the budgets were also much, much higher, at least if you consider inflation and take that into account. The budgets were much higher for the same kind of work we now do for much less money. So maybe I don't know. It's confusing to me. I have a hard time figuring out whether it's more affordable now to be an artist or then. I have no idea.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's tricky.
I mean, there's the business model that we have is that you get, once you're in, it sort of starts to snowball, right? Like you get a job and you start to make some money. You can start to spend some money on some new tech. You can upgrade to a better computer. Maybe you can buy a studio space, a better scanner, something like that. But like it's that end that I think frustrates
The point of entry,
people.
you mean?
Yeah.
Like getting in and getting to where you are able to produce the work in the first place and have it seen. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to determine what the break would be at our point, because it's a little grayer now, because like we could produce something and put it up and it could go viral. We might not make any money, but that is like the first thing that starts the chain that, you know, leads to your first job.
I do think it gives people more access. Like, I think it's started a new generation of artists who started way younger, like before someone else give them permission to be like, now you can make art, or to like seem like an official artist, to have like real paintings. Like, painting material is really expensive.
It gives people access to spaces too, like I mean, and being able to form their own communities that are like totally legitimate. Like, you know, in the past where you had to congregate at places like Society, and there was like a very homogenous like you know group, and now with the internet, like even like a high schooler with a computer at their library can be on the same platform as their professional, like somebody who they hope to be like in the future. Like, and now you can create your own community, you can create your own space, and communicating online, you can enter into these professional spaces in a way that was not possible.
And you can pirate Photoshop.
Communities. Yeah, we were talking about pirating.
Yeah.
I pirated, what did I use? I had a version of Photoshop CS5 on my laptop for the longest time that was in German, because that was the only one I could find. And I used it. I learned a lot of German. So it's better than paying for it.
I feel like most of our generation must have pirated it, because it's always been a very expensive software.
Yeah, but I as soon as I graduated college, I just broke down and bought it. I mean, it ate up my first paycheck, but then I felt better about it. But I'm old, so never mind. That was Photoshop. Photoshop 6.
I don't think you're alone.
I think that's what you have to do when you become professional. But
well,
I mean, I don't know.
I was professional for a long time before I bought it.
But you bought it.
I think when people pay you, you're a professional. Like, it don't, like...
I don't know.
It doesn't matter what
I
you
have
made it
complicated
on.
feelings about money. But
Yeah, so let's segue into our next topic. So we started talking about community and how that affected us as illustrators. So on the subject of depicting technology in illustrations, we want to talk about like the inclusiveness and diversity in the illustrations that we produce. So what's your overall feeling about the illustrations that you were asked to make, so like your commissions and then your personal work? And do you feel that there is a divide, like there is an actual divide between people who pay and people who like and praise, so like your fans and your clients? Do you feel that you do have to navigate those worlds, or in 2016 we're so caught up that we don't worry about that anymore?
I work with the Wall Street Journal a lot, and I'm always explicitly instructed, not always, but most of the time I'm explicitly instructed, if there are multiple figures in an illustration, I'm told exactly what the ethnicity and the sex of the person should be as far as the depiction goes of those individuals, so that there's guaranteed to be diversity. And so that's an interesting publication, because they have taken it upon themselves, the creative team has taken it upon themselves to not even leave the door open for me to not do that. Does that make sense? Like, and I don't know how it is with the rest of you if you work with the journal, but that's always been my relationship with the art directors there. They are very specific in the art direction.
Yeah, actually I do too with the Wall Street Journal. It's very specific, and then if they want to change something, we'll change something. Yeah. But
that's my only real comment on that, because they're the only publication I've worked with that's asked me to do any kind of spots or illustrations relating to tech or people working in tech, or science, or things like that. So
Yeah, what are you guys' experiences?
I think, I mean, as far as illustration goes, I try, I'm still working on my own contribution to being more inclusive and diverse in my own work, but as far as my observations of our field, I feel like there is a divide. And it's more and more obvious the more it's pointed out to me. And I'm grateful for that, because you can see clearly that the people we work with, the people who are able to come to events at the society, the people who give me jobs, people who will buy my work, they're often white men, they're often white women, they're often already sort of established in their own career, and a lot of my fans and a lot of the young people who I talk to are incredibly diverse. And it's like in an illustration, there's such a clean divide. Like, maybe it's equal. You find there's a lot of men working in illustration, there's a lot of women working in illustration, even though in school there's all the classes, the majority of them are women. And so I wondered, like, as you get higher and higher, like, how do we filter ourselves out and how we can change it?
I guess it's less about technology, but definitely in the vein of just having people directing you for jobs. And I've worked for a few years in commercials. So that is like usually a pretty depressing story.
Oh boy.
And it's something I kind of struggle with. And I've worked with really great companies, but it always comes down to what the client wants, and it's all about pleasing the client. And you can kind of push back on some things, but it does get kind of soul crushing, because just like as a rule for myself, if anyone's ever like, all right, Leland, we need you to do a bunch of character designs, I'm like, all right, one white person in this lineup of so many people, and they usually almost always change everyone to be white, or except for like one. I mean, I don't want to name any companies, but I do have like a list in my mind that I'm like, someday you guys, someday I'm gonna expose you. But yeah, I feel like all I can really do is make sure that the work I make is as diverse as I can make it, pretty much. Like, that's just what I'm interested in. And you see how far you can fight your boss or whoever is telling you to change things up. But I'm also kind of new to the industry, so I feel like over the years I'll be able to make more decisions and kind of like bring down the hammer and be like, nope, not budging on this. So
Do you fight? Do you get into arguments?
Well, I usually with the production companies I work with, it's kind of a mutual feeling. Like, I'll complain to my director and they'll be like, yeah, I know, but we just gotta, and I'll sit there muttering at my desk for like the next few days being like, man, you've made the list. So that's kind of my I imagine that's kind of a experience a lot of people have.
Yeah, I've heard that from other people too.
Yeah, it sucks, but you always have personal work you can make, and because that's the most tied to you, I think that's where representation matters, no matter what the context. But I think if it comes from you, then that's just the best work.
Do you think it's important or necessary for illustrators or our directors to somehow make that like more clear to people? Because I do feel like now when you illustrate or write or anything for professional use, when it's published, it is only published, say, in one publication. In the past, that would just go with that paper magazine, and whoever buys it will read it. But now everything's going to be on the internet. Do you feel that not only you're illustrating for your client, you're also illustrating for people who support your brand and your image?
Yeah, responsibilities coming from like way more places now. Like, you're going to share your work that you made for some specific magazine with a bunch of people who would never see it otherwise. And I think it's great that now we feel like all these eyes are on us, and it's so important to to be really conscious, and I do think it's art directors' responsibilities to, like even if gatekeepers are diversifying, unfortunately so slowly, you have to try. I think.
I listened to, do you all know the picture book artist Christian Robinson?
He's the best.
Yeah, there was a nice conversation he had with Mac Barnett at a university. I don't remember which one it was now, I'm trying to think, but it doesn't matter. You can watch it on YouTube. But there was a point in the conversation where they brought up the importance of having characters in the books that Christian illustrates or anyone illustrates be diverse, not just for certain topics of writing. Like the example he gave, I think, was he said for the book Leo. Have you seen the Ghost book? Leo the Ghost. Anyway, with Mac Barnett wrote it and he illustrated it, but it was kind of like he said that as much as he can. I don't want to put words. I hate to misquote him, but I'm going to try anyway. Basically, the gist of it was, if there's a kid and the kid's hanging out in a park, then make that kid whatever, make that kid any race other than white, just because, it doesn't have to be that it's a story about something where we would normally, traveling back in time, say, oh, this looks like it's a story about inner city youth, and that's African Americans and maybe Hispanic, what I'm saying? Instead, he said, okay, there's a story about a kid who wants to fly a rocket. Well, I'm going to paint that kid as an African American. And the reason, not only because that, that's his job is to do it that way, but he said that he feels like by the artist taking control and doing it first and continuing to do it, it hopefully then or rather not prods, but it just pushes the rest of the establishment along a little bit. It's like we're the ones pushing them along to just catch up and to do it themselves. I don't know. If you listen to him say it, it's a lot more eloquent, but I thought it was just really nice how he explained why it's important for the artists to be the ones who continually break with tradition and just depict people however they wish, and to purposely make those people look like the people around them, not just like this one, Norman Rockwell kid. If someone says draw a kid,
it's like the ultimate kid. It's like the little white boy,
right?
That everyone grew up thinking that they are, but they're not.
Why is that the go-to? And then it shouldn't be. But we're the ones who changed that. So he basically was. Yeah, it was nice. I liked it, and it made me kind of feel like I'm lazy sometimes, and I need to really pay attention to that.
Yeah, we can all do better, and depict who we depict and who we illustrate is one part, but I think visibility is an issue as far as who we hire and who we work with too. I think.
Sure.
Definitely down to like the actual humans who work, which is also I do think technology gives way to artists who are way younger. Like they don't have to have like an MFA or like in their like mid-career to be super established. So it's kind of like I feel like the playing field is a lot more leveled, and then people can change their styles and they can change directions. It's a lot more free. So I feel like the conversation changes a little bit versus like we must bring the women or like the women of color or like anyone else like into the conversation. Like they are here. So like it becomes really awkward. Be like, wait, no, like I thought this is respectful to like include you in this, and then it's not always. I feel like it's a conversation that's happening now that people think they're doing right, and then they're feeling very conflicted about being told that they're doing wrong. But then that's based on perhaps in the past, like, it's just that people don't even have the access and they won't be there. So like the right thing to do is to like bring the image of people there, but it's like, no, they're actually here. Like it's like you don't need to do it anymore, kind of. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Well, it gets really frustrating when somebody feels like they deserve like cookies or accolades for like even bothering to tell the story of somebody like you, when it's like, well, I would just really like if it was somebody who had this experience just telling a story like from this perspective, like it, because it, like you end up seeing the same narratives over and over and over again. And like Kyle, I feel like in books, I feel like people always hold up the snowy day as like the prime example of like this like a great use of that.
But that, I mean, I think when it was May, what was it, the mid 60s?
Something
I guess.
like that. But that was but it was a white illustrator, I'm pretty sure.
Ezra Keats. Well, what was I going to say? When was that published though?
I forget. It's definitely
like, are there any other examples apart from that?
I feel like Corduroy, and it blows my mind how old those are the two examples that everybody can think of, and there's nothing more contemporary.
Anyway.
Well, there are, but
yeah. But in terms of, I guess we got a little sidetracked because we didn't talk about it specifically in the tech sphere. When you're asked to illustrate, those of you, and this is the thing, I don't get asked this a lot, so I wish I had more to say about this, but I don't. But does anyone there have a lot of experience drawing tech stories about technology or advancements in science and tech or whatever, where you have been specifically instructed not to draw a person of color or anything, or has that ever happened?
In editorial,
I heard the example of the advertising. Sorry, that's definitely sad to hear. But
in some of like the in-house work that I do, yes, but not an editorial, I don't think.
Yeah, in the in-house work I have done, actually, there are companies, tech or not tech, that are under fire for lacking diversity. So they really want to diversify. Which is nice, but then it trickles down to the illustrators who do them lacking knowledge of how to draw people of ethnicities other than Caucasian, and it's frustrating to say to be the lead artist on that and having to like instruct everyone, and then just having people come back and be like, do you like this better now? Like, what do you think, as like the only non-white person working on this? I was like, I can't tell you. Like, I just thought that guy had weird eyes. I told you to fix it. I just thought you wouldn't draw it that way. I thought wrong. So like it's like very strange, because I do think it's a business move for a lot of companies to super rapidly diversify, and I don't know how much meaning it gives besides the fact that it gets people out of lawsuits. So I do think there's like a new wave of people just mining for illustrators who can do it, because that ultimately like saves the day in a way, like in this like crisis that people perceive that they are under. I think that in technology, like the tech field is extremely under pressure for improving their diversity quota.
Yeah, not just like the things that we are asked to illustrate, but in the offices I work in, they're not diverse. The staff, the teams I work with, and so when we're asked to create a series of characters, it's only one level. There's another level that no one is looking around and asking about. Sort of sitting at this at a large table full of people who all look like me. There's voices that aren't being heard, and it's more and more obvious.
Yeah, well, it goes back to that thing that I keep hearing where people say, it's not like Kyle, you said, like we're not doing a story about a black thing, so don't make them black, which is like, just baffling. Yeah. Because it's like, that assumes that everyone in the conversation is white. like aside from this non-existent black story. Like, I don't know.
I think the tech illustrations or the tech articles are especially like in a place where like all of your people of color and women who have racial and sexism issues are in this other section. Like in this other genre where people are just like struggling or like having like a great like big break or like having all of these like personal accounts, where technology is still like, it looks like the technology field whereas mostly white folks and dudes. So like I just like when people ask them to like ask the art directors or the illustrators to like actually diversify their illustration, I don't know if that's like truthful. And I think it's nice, it brings more illustrators more work, but like it's, what do you guys think that do you think the illustrations will help people perceive technology differently? Like if we insert more women and people of color, people are going to eventually perceive the tech field as belonging to these people, or is still kind of like an optic effort?
I think that it's definitely important to do it, but I think it's only one thing of many things that we should try harder to do.
Yeah, it seems like a chicken and egg situation, because it's like you should depict the technology as diverse, but also hire diverse people in your tech field. And I think, I guess it doesn't really, for me, I don't think it matters if you are depicting the tech industry as diverse when it's not. Like that may be untruthful or whatever, but or like people might think it's untruthful, but I think it's just like it's the representation thing. It's like diverse people exist in tech, and I mean that's the great thing about art, is that it can change minds and change how people perceive the world. So as long as you
sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to agree with you, and I was thinking of a pop culture example, or rather a media example. I hope this is relevant, but I think absolutely if we do it first and continue, or if we just continue to do it, it's bound to eventually have some impact. Certainly not doing it is a terrible idea, but what I was going to say is if any of you saw the Christopher Nolan Batman films, Lucius Fox, played by Morgan Freeman, traditionally, the comics world and the movies and everything going back a long way, it was so white, and then what was interesting I found was, Morgan Freeman played Fox in the films, and then the TV show Gotham, Chris Chalk, the actor who plays Lucius Fox, is also African American. To me, I can't help but think that Christopher Nolan's film helped to make that just sort of be a thing that people didn't even bat an eye. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Well, we're going to have diversity in this cast. This is just a direct pull from the film. It happened to be an African American. Now it's an African American as well. But I don't know. It just seems to me like that's an obvious case where one person made a decision and opened a little door. I don't know.
Changing associations.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And so if we're continually, drawing figures and characters in our picture books and in our comics and everything, and depicting people, showing diversity rather in the illustrations, I don't see how it can't eventually have some impact. I mean,
yeah, I do think it's also the actual human thing where when you get to a certain level, it's one thing to be equipped with all of the knowledge, and it's another thing to be perceived as someone who's professional and workable, and then to be trusted with something. Like, I mean, one day you're gonna have because it's funny, like you would have a person who's an illustrator who's a person of color who is great at drawing white people. Like that can be a thing, but then now it's not a thing. Like when you have a thing that's only white people, would definitely only hire a white person. Like it's
Yeah, that's weird.
There's our technology is one aspect of what levels the playing field, but I feel like there's always been a tradition in illustration of paying it forward, and there's always going to be someone who gives you a leg up, and who gives you your first connection or your first job, and that hasn't changed. Even with Twitter, even with being able to reach the same level and occupy the same space as people of different fields, and being able to enter yourself, like it's not. I feel like it's dangerous to say, okay, well, you have all this technology, so now it's on you, and now you have the power to enter this world, so enter it. But there's still, I still feel like because I was helped by so many people to get here, and now it's passed on to me. It's my role to also help people into the illustration field as I continue to grow. That's a big part of it too. Is as part of our job, it's our responsibility to pay it forward. It's our responsibility to open up those doors and to see and to allow other people into this space as well. And that hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes way longer than people think.
Yeah.
And then to talk about inclusiveness in illustration, there's the Newsweek cover that was published last year about sexual harassment that women in Silicon Valley experience. So that's a great case of being inclusive and including a group that people don't usually think about or like although associate with tech. And then the illustration was commissioned for it that wasn't. It just wasn't liked by women and the women in Silicon Valley. And then so that's kind of like the question at the end of the day, like we can include folks and we can hire them and we can pay them a ton of money, but like at the end of the day, where does like everyone's like personal biases go, and then like who gets to write the actual story of the arc of a character that's introduced into an illustration? Like what are you guys' thought on that incident, like individually, and then also like what do you think? Like that's a great case of being inclusive, but then ended up being not inclusive.
I thought, I mean, it was just something that a lot of people paid attention to, but it brought attention to a problem in our industry that has gone on for a long time, and tension in our industry that has been there for a long time. And I felt like it was good in that I think it helped a lot of people feel comfortable talking about things that they beforehand felt uncomfortable being public about. And so it was an incident that brought a lot of people together.
It's a really positive way of looking at it. Also, I want to explain for anyone who's listening in who are not familiar. It's an illustration of a woman who's wearing a short dress and her skirt was being lifted up by a mouse cursor to signify the moment of shock when someone experiences sexual harassment, which is one of the many solutions of an illustration, and it has been framed as a controversy because there are like points from every angle. Like it was an illustration that would have stood and was very popular like even a few years ago, I think, and today it's been shared on the internet, and then also it's being perceived by people who otherwise would not have been the readers of Newsweek or the readership of that. So do you think with technology and then with the new generation of artists, like there's going to be a new standard for what people think are like this changing definition of being correct and being PC?
Oh yeah, it
Like,
has
is
to.
that
I
bar
mean,
just
it's just
changing?
the natural evolution of things. What once was considered by some people to be inoffensive or harmless or whatever, people get enlightened, people learn more, people engage more with each other, and they become aware of what is not, I don't know if the word appropriate is correct, but what's offensive and why, and then you learn from it and you grow, and then that's what everything, and then the whole industry grows as a whole. So I think it's important that it happened and that there was a lot of discussion about it. And I highly doubt you'll ever see another cover like that on a major magazine, and that's a good thing. So
I feel like
I don't think anyone came out strongly to defend it. At least not.
We live in a bubble.
I don't think Newsweek really can. I think ultimately it's Newsweek's responsibility. They published it. I mean, it's important for them to come out and say, whoops, that probably wasn't a good idea. We should have been more sensitive. We should have thought about this. We have taken into consideration all the comments that were made, and we realized that this was a poor editorial choice. Did they say that? I don't know. I didn't follow the story as
think they
closely as some people
unequivocally
did tell me.
defended
Did they?
Yeah.
Does anybody know what the ultimate?
They stood by
didn't
it.
say that was a bad choice. They said it was provocative and it drew attention to the story. And then the writer of the story wasn't happy because it completely distracted from the actual article.
It had almost nothing to do with the article.
Yeah.
I felt like.
Yeah, I didn't read the article. Can somebody,
As far as
what was the
illustration
article?
goes.
Sorry, what was the so the article was not specifically about.
It was about what the title was. What do Silicon Valley think of women?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. And so
I mean,
there
that's
you
a kind
go.
of weird title.
So people made the argument. I don't know. So it was I think like a good article, about like difficulties that women face in the tech workplace, but the cover chose to depict the harassment rather than like depict the problem, like the suffering, the pain, like from that perspective. It was like very much like from the perspective of the harasser, kind of.
Yeah, it was very like the explanation was like it's illustrating it, which I was like, there are other ways you can.
I think it's good that it was talked about so much, though.
Yeah.
I feel like Newsweek itself almost becomes irrelevant because it's like they can have whatever awful opinion they want, but it reached so many eyes, and I think a lot of people changed their minds about what is. I don't know if even the word, what was it? PC. I mean, like PC or offensive. Instead of saying that, I'd say like respectful. Because I think that's really what it comes down to. Is like people aren't being like, I'm offended. That's not really what it's about. It's about like, you're not seeing me as a person. Like, this illustration does not describe me or doesn't represent me as a person. Like, like a woman who would be sexually harassed, like, I can't imagine being that person and looking at that illustration and feeling like that was fair in any way.
And that's on the cover of a magazine, and also it just talking about inclusiveness that is like not inclusive of the subject that is being depicted. It's for someone else to look at this issue.
No one who's experienced that would have ever made that image.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
God. I feel like it's going to be, I mean, it is always like, it's a conversation that comes up all the time, and I feel like we probably will actually see, we'll be dealing with plenty of illustrations like that and plenty of situations like that, but the more times the conversation comes up, that's progress.
Yeah.
So
the more we learn to talk about, I mean, I think one thing that I would have liked to learn more as a student, and that I'm happy that I'm learning more about now, and in part due to the illustration and the conversation it started, was how to debate and how to have a discussion about topics that I think are important, not just with peers, but with the people who hire me. And I think it's important that because our work is so ingrained in what's going on, and it's so ingrained in information and spreading information, that we should be able to talk about it and to be able to debate it. And it's great that what's happening is that people who at once felt like their voices wouldn't be heard, or felt like they were scared to speak about things that made them uncomfortable, that now they feel supported. And I think like they feel like they have people out there in the ether who support them, and so they can stick up for themselves.
Yeah, I feel like one thing, like for me, it was like, yeah, I'm not like afraid to talk about it because it makes me uncomfortable. I think if I talked about it, people won't hire me anymore. I think now I feel more supported in a way, like, oh, if they don't hire me, I have a community.
They're wrong.
Like, I'm gonna find someone else who will hire me again. So I think that kind of support has also allowed people to really speak up and then be able to be themselves online or with their friends, because I think maintaining multiple levels of viewpoints really like breaks your spirit eventually. And I do think technology as a platform, it's great for people to connect with each other.
You know, I think it's also, what do you think about subjects that are really difficult to illustrate? For example, what if the article was explicitly about sexual harassment in the workplace? When you get an assignment like that, do the rest of you, I don't know about you, but I always get really nervous and I start freaking out going, well, how do I handle this and not make some kind of misstep? You know, because I don't want to be caught up in the middle of some controversy like that. So, but at the same time, you know, you have to illustrate the topic. So what do you do when you have a topic that is very sensitive?
Well, maybe there is something to be said for passing that kind of work along to, or even if you can't do that, like I've definitely had people reach out to me personally and be like, can you check out this article? Is this like, would this be a cool direction to go in?
But that's still just one person's opinion. What if, I mean...
It's one person, but it's like if you get the assignment and you feel like, wow, this is completely, like, I can't relate to this in any way. I guess not even relating to, but just kind of like, I think it's good to do your research that way and kind of reach out to people who you've noticed talking about the subject. And that's another great thing about Twitter, about technology, is that you can be vocal about that. And hopefully that research will put you in contact with kind of other points of view.
Yeah. Research.
So you said you've done that before. Has anyone else, have any of you, the rest of you ever felt like, did you get an assignment at one point and think, oh man, this is a little hard for me to, it's scary, maybe,
I mean, I'm in the middle of it, so I can't give you the full story, but I feel like, there's definitely times when people come to you with an assignment that I feel grateful that I can say, like, yes, this will fit someone else much better, and there is someone else out there who will want this job. So I hope that it works out, though. I haven't heard
that. Can be a hard decision to make when you're starting out in your career and you need the money. What do you do then?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I might have taken the job if I was at a different place in my career. So I don't know if that's the right answer or not, or if that's the best thing to do, but I think that's the action I would have taken.
Yeah, I had people email me with pieces that they're doing and they think I would be able to check it. And I was like, oh, that's fine. That's like checking, like, it's just like giving feedback for anything else. And then there was an illustration a friend of mine did about like Asian women taking tests or something, and I was just like, well, if you just have her like look at camera, that would be great, because I'm just tired of like Asian women like staring into space. I was like, what, there's no reason, like no one's gonna call you out for that. Like small stuff like that is fun. Like I wouldn't have been like, why didn't you give that job to me? Like it's fair game, I think.
Yeah.
It's a good attitude. attitude.
I was just wondering, because I think about that a lot now. I think just, should I be doing...
Well, yeah, I mean, if you do have the extra work, like sometimes it's like, yeah, if you do get it again, if it really makes you freak out, give it to someone else. That might save you an online disaster. Like you do weigh the pros and cons, and sometimes money is just one of the factors.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Commercials, man.
Yeah.
Do you think that by having the potential to misstep and make an illustration that really goes the wrong way, not having meant to, of course, but do it anyway, and then have it blow up in your face, do you think that that keeps all of us in a space where we get scared and we go for safe solutions and we don't try and push the envelope?
I think the risk of failure is something just you always face when you're making an illustration. And I think that, like, if you fail horribly, if you learn from it, that's a good thing, you know?
Will people give you the benefit of the doubt? I mean, even if you say mea culpa, oops, I didn't mean to offend anyone, I didn't mean to be insensitive with this illustration, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Do you think by that point the damage has been done when the Twitter bots and all the
accountable
trolls
helps.
gang up on you?
Being
You have to
accountable
recover.
is important. I think
What does that mean?
I think it goes a long way to apologize or to acknowledge
And not
where
say,
you
Oh,
might have been
I
short-sighted.
thought you said cannibal.
Very important.
Cannibal is the only way to go.
But, like, apologizing and not saying like, sorry, I offended you, here's my explanation, blah blah blah, but saying like, oh, like I'm really
Yeah.
listening. You know,
No,
of course.
I know. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. If you say that, though, do you think that the community now at large, our community, maybe not just, I don't mean just illustration, but do you think that on the internet, if you make a mistake and people gang up on you and point it out, and that's a good thing, and you do apologize and you do understand what you've done wrong and make that known, do you think, though, that the environment, the internet environment, is more of a negative place than a positive place, and they would rather rake you over the coals for as long as possible and keep the hateful energy going and beat you down? Or do you think that they would more quickly say, oh, okay, well, now that you understand and you made a mistake, I'm glad you understand, let's move on? Or, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I guess that's just kind of the mob mentality versus individual opinion thing. Like, we haven't, no one's really figured out how to deal with, you know, Twitter mob, with just like angry internet mobs.
Right, and that's a new
I mean,
phenomenon.
That's a risk you run.
We're painting a very negative picture of the internet.
Yeah.
Here. There's a lot of negative words being given, and I feel like that might be unfairly judging people's reactions to things. I think sometimes people do get passionate on the internet about things that they feel strongly about, and I think that there is a tendency to feel scared of that and to hesitate and feel that fear, but I don't think that it's a bad thing. And I think that what I have found, I think what you'll find, or what you have found, is that it all, like, apologizing does bring about a positive end, and that people don't get ostracized from making a mistake.
Yeah, I also think it's just part of, like we talked about in the beginning, like technology has, like, it's the thing now. Like we're not going anywhere else. It's only gonna be like part of life. And I feel like there are internet mobs and there are people mobs, and there's internet abuse and there's people abuse. So like it's always at some point we're all gonna be like really anxious about something that we're gonna do and wishing that people wouldn't gang up on us.
I mean, you can't like just not do it for fear of like people coming at you, you know. I think as long as you are respectful, and I mean, for me personally, an apology goes a long way. Like a sincere, like, okay, now I've learned from this thing kind of apology, you know. I think it's, and I've
seen it happen too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It happens.
You've seen it happen specifically with illustration? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. It happens. It does happen from time to time.
Yeah, we are planning to have a podcast just about social media and fundraising and like alternative ways to pay and get paid. So I think that would be a very interesting conversation of how people build their brands and how do they maintain their voice and how do they like this stuff. I'm sure that would be like an entire hour, and then that would be very interesting. But yeah, I want to keep us on track of time and then moving on to just the last part about some last thoughts about where do you think all of this is taking us as illustrators. Do you think the digital media, just like traditional media, is also going to phase out one day, just like a type of media? Like, what if people got rid of images? Like, stuff like that. Like, what
traditional media hasn't phased out yet, so I'm hoping traditional or digital media doesn't either.
I can't imagine it would, really.
Things will take different forms. Like, we're always going to be visually experiencing things, whether that's like entirely in like a VR context or something. But like, yeah, like the sensory experience is never going to go away, but the medium and the mechanism may change. But I don't know anything specific.
We're going to be back here in 10 years and be griping about like in the old days.
Yeah, we used to tweet things, get into internet fights. So what do you guys think in terms of like what kind of jobs do you think you would be doing 10 years from now? How do you plan to integrate things like VR or like motion and video? I know you guys are already doing that, but you are on top of it. So what's your plan for being always on top of it?
10 years is a long time. The entire industry, a lot of our jobs didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to imagine what could happen. But definitely, like, art incorporated into VR is already happening. It's already, like, people are already trying to do it.
It's clunky, but yeah.
It's clunky, but it's going to get there. It's really cool.
And not just VR, but also I think film is so accessible because now we can tool around with like MIDI keyboards, we can make the music, we can animate, we can stitch everything together, we can edit, like everything is on a computer, and if you just teach yourself to do it, you can really become a director of whatever project you want to do. And I think that's what's so exciting about technology and just keeping up with everything new is that you just get so much control. And yeah.
5 centimeters per second.
I think if I don't have a tool in my hand that's roughly pencil sized and I'm making marks and making drawings, I'm never going to be happy. So I don't know what's going to happen with VR and all this other stuff, but if it doesn't involve me having to draw in some way with, that same motion of moving my hand around and watching marks appear, then I know personally I would be miserable. So I hope that in 10 years I'm still able to do that in some form. Otherwise, because I have no interest in collage or in assembling anything or in building stuff, I just want to draw. So that's the great one joy I've had that's been a constant since I was like 3. It's not going to change. I don't know. Do the rest of you like drawing as much as me?
I think that's a good. Yep. I like that. I like that image because that's why we're all here. We just really like making marks.
Yeah.
We all had sketchbooks and pieces of paper like our entire lives.
Yeah.
So that's probably. I mean, we might be doing something else on top of that, but I don't think that's going to change.
The industry that I'm in, or the section of the industry right now, has not changed in a really long time, which is interesting. Like picture books, and I've been working a lot in middle grade. Like even when it's digital, when it's an ebook, when it's on as an Amazon icon, it's still the same. So maybe I'll keep doing that for as long as I can, and then I guess similarly to Kyle, maybe I don't know if I'd want to do the same thing in another way. Who knows?
Yeah, I definitely want to keep doing comics.
Oh yeah,
Comics will never change.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like making marks, making a picture happen, whether it's on a computer or with paint or whatever. That's just such a fantastic feeling. I love it, and I would hate for that to disappear, or for me not to be able to do it and make money, I guess, and support myself and my family. That would be a real tragedy. But
yeah, do you guys have ideas of ways that you can keep your illustration or like work the way that you like to work, and then insert that into the new technology that people haven't been using a whole lot with illustration yet?
I want to learn some new software so that I can incorporate my illustrations into 3D. Because I'm working with people who basically do that for me. Like they'll take my painting and turn it into a space, and I just want to do it. I want to do it all by myself. Because I think that there's a lot of potential there. Like there's ways to paint in 3 dimensions now too.
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
See, you should get on that.
Yeah, it's happening.
Collaboration too. I mean, like working with other people who will work with you. I'm probably like what you're doing right now to do something technically that you can't. Like I don't know. Like I drew a comic with a steel nib, and then my friend and I like animated it completely on the computer, and it was the same, but it was different, and it was two people working on a thing, and I don't know. That was cool. I don't know. Like working together. I think that's a good solution.
Yeah.
Do you have one, Leland?
I think I definitely agree about the 3D. I think 3D is like such a cool and deep thing to get into. And I originally wanted to make games, I think, when I was back in college. And after getting into games, I was like, oh, no, I don't. But what I really like about games is how deeply you can explore a world, and how you can be in a 3D space. And I think that is definitely a passion I still have, and I'm still interested in, even though it is so hard.
It's like when we all have like jacks in our necks, and the internet is just like a space we walk around in virtual reality.
I can't wait for that.
Can't wait.
Yeah, do you draw that space, or do you draw in that space, and then what becomes the drawing?
No, it just comes from our minds.
Will we walk through somebody's marks that they made,
Yeah.
but we'll be able to experience it differently.
Yeah, that's a good image to end on, actually. So we are just at our 9 o'clock mark, so I'm going to conclude. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Fun.
I'll talk to you next time, listeners.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.